The 26th Avenue crossing in Bradenton, Florida is the throat of CSX's Tropicana rail yard, and it's where the journey to Jersey will begin. Welcome back to the Sunshine State Rails. In this video, we're going to cover the modernized version of what CSX used to call the Tropicana Juice Train, running 5 days a week from Bradenton to Kearney, New Jersey. Over the years, we've since lost that train, and the procedures that now get the cars from here to New Jersey have changed many times over. But seeing CSX revert to a new but old practice gave me the idea to do this video originally in 2023. We're going to give you a bit of an overview of how the Tropicana cars now run from Bradenton's plant to New Jersey and back, covering quite a bit of content from many years ago, as well as a good run through Jacksonville and CSX's huge intermodal center there. When precision scheduled railroading took over CSX's scene on April 1st of 2017, the Tropicana Juice Train would be abolished. The loaded Tropicana cars, now bound for New Jersey or otherwise, would now leave Bradenton on a local symboled train running from Tampa to Bradenton and back. In the present day, that train is now symboled L700. And the train we can see here building their outbound consist from the yard is symboled L775. And we observe them here with their assigned GE wide cab locomotive number 7912, now performing the daily ritual of pulling today's train out of the yard and preparing it with whatever consist is set to go north with the rest of the train. This here is a scene that I have seen repeated countless times over the years with many variances in motive power, with anything from these Dash 8s to the typical wide cab Gevos to the ever-elusive SD50-3s. Another incentive of mine to have made this video has to do with the fact that Tropicana products are not doing too well on the market nowadays. Despite the ever-increasing population numbers moving to Florida, less and less people seem to be having an interest in citrus products. A conversation within the Florida Rail Fans Facebook group and an article posted by the CNN news outlet alluded to Tropicana potentially having to file bankruptcy at some point very soon. Now, I obviously can't speak to the total accuracy of that headline, but the recent lack of interest in citrus juices mixed with the citrus diseases as well as the multiple hurricanes that Florida has endured in these last few years has put the financial position of the citrus industry as a whole at an all-time low. Unfortunately, I have a prime example of this phenomenon right in my own backyard. At the Florida Railroad Museum, right over our Dickey Road crossing, is a field that used to be full of blooming orange groves. I've been around the museum long enough to remember what this property looked like when the groves were in bloom, but it's been almost 10 years since anything has grown out here. What you have to understand here is that when a storm or type of disease wipes out a set of orange groves, it takes the trees anywhere from 4 to 8 years to recover. With the recent rate at which Florida has been seeing these types of diseases and major hurricanes mixed with the incredibly fast development that is taking over fields everywhere with new houses, and all this simply means that the citrus groves, if wiped out, are simply unable to recover fast enough, if at all, and mixed with the lack of interest in citrus products, it means the citrus industry in Florida is simply no longer profitable. We are still lucky enough to at least have populations of cattle roaming most of these empty fields out here in Parish, but with all of the development that I've seen in the entirety of Manatee County in these last couple years, I am almost positive that within a few years I'll be able to show you this same property with nothing but cookie-cutter houses on it. So while the future of the orange industry doesn't quite look as bright as the fruit does, the trains are still hauling the commodity to some degree, so we're gonna make this video while we can. Once the yard switcher pulls the entirety of the train set to go to Tampa out of the yard tracks, the power and crew of L700, the local train, backs down onto their Tampa-bound consist to pull away north. It had recently become common practice for the local crew to conjoin with their outbound train here at the 26th Avenue crossing. For all years prior, the yard job would stage the train about a quarter mile from here at the US 301 crossing. Presumably, the alternative here is to block a much less busy road crossing in the process of hooking the locomotives up and getting their train orders ready to go. Once the train is built and handed off to the L700 crew, the reefers are ready to begin the first part of their journey from Bradenton to Tampa. As seen here from a throwback on July 1st of 2017, when 2 Norfolk Southern locomotives made it into town to pull this train, whereas this train was still a local job back then, symboled 0823 here, this day's outbound consist was nearly 60 cars long. Though this clip was shot nearly 8 years ago now, not much about this US 41 and 301 crossing scene has changed. The trains have gotten shorter, but traffic will still back up 2 or 3 blocks, mainly because more people live in the state now, not so much because the trains are any bigger. What has changed since this time period, however, is the representation of the original juice train. Around this time, the local train was still basically the juice train, simply limited to Tampa where it would be mixed with another train. Though as time went on, they slowly began to take the local switcher designation much further, giving 0823 and the later L700 many extra duties beyond simply Tropicana. This would eventually lead to miscellaneous freight blocks being added to the front or rear of the train, leaving it to not look so much like its unit train predecessor. But now following the Tropicana's path out of Bradenton, here's a bit of a later example of another 0823 a bit further north on the Palmetto Sub coming north through Port Manatee. This example from the summer of 2019 had the CSX locomotives back in charge, but a rather unique set here too. While things around this time period were beginning to change a little bit, the trains could still be represented pretty well, as with this Saturday an all Tropicana train headed north for Tampa. Nowadays, with the additional customer duties and the subsequent decline in Tropicana's traffic volume, it's often you'll see more manifest freight on this train now than you will Tropicana. Now having traversed the entirety of the Palmetto subdivision, now coming in at TS, the Tropicana's first stop on the way would be Yeoman Yard, Tampa. As the local switcher's crew slows the train to a stop to line various switches in the yard to get their route lined up so that the Jersey Trops can be separated from the train here. Tropicana has 2 northern major distribution centers remaining that I'm aware of, those that are located in Kearney, New Jersey and Cincinnati, Ohio. And coming north out of Bradenton, the Tropicana trains will often consist of cars bound for both facilities. And while the New Jersey plant definitely receives the bulk of whatever's left, the routes in which these 2 cars take to their respective terminals is varying at this point. The Tropicanas bound for the Cincinnati plant will be set off here in Yeoman with the rest of the miscellaneous freight to head north in regular freight service at some point tomorrow, while the rest of the cars bound for the New Jersey plant, now referred to as simply the Jerseys, will be transferred over to Uceda Yard on the Yeoman transfer. This transfer track allows trains to transfer from the Yeoman Freight Yard up and over to the Uceda Yard and Intermodal ramp. It would be on this transfer track that the Motive Power and handful of Tropicanas for New Jersey would go on duty as train I-044 at 4:45 p.m. I-044 is a northbound intermodal container train from here at Uceda to Jacksonville TOFC, and this is the reverted to practice that ultimately prompted me to make this whole video. CSX, rather than running Tropicana as its own train from Bradenton to Jersey or Ohio, will run the Tropicanas to New Jersey at least on the heads of respective intermodals starting from Tampa. The Tropicana Juice Train, when it was still a unit train, was damn near the highest priority train on all of CSX. So tacking them now on the heads of respective intermodals that also hold rather high priorities on the system keep these still perishable products moving at a pretty steady rate so that the cars are not idle at any point for long. The I-044 crew begins their evening by doubling their train out of the 2 respective Uceda Yard tracks. For a fair portion of the day up until this point, the cranes and forklifts have been hard at work in Uceda loading a respective set of well and spine cars with high priority UPS trailers and double stack containers to head north to Jacksonville tonight. And once everything is hooked together and aired up, it'll all be on the move as the Tropicana's second quadrant of their trip to New Jersey. With the whole train now put together and dispatch acknowledging, train IO-44 is now ready to blast off from Uceda for Jacksonville. The UPS trailers mounted in this train's consist, as well as the now perishable products at the head end, means this train is at the top of the dispatcher's list on the S-line for tonight. I'm not so sure about Tropicana now, but I've heard plenty of rumors over the years on how UPS won't exactly be friendly if their shipments are delayed. Sorry, UPS, this isn't quite about you. The New Jersey Tropicanas are now on the second quadrant of their journey to New Jersey, and here we catch a set of them coming north on an IO-44 through downtown Plant City, Florida. After a straight shot east out of Tampa, the IO-44 train will turn north by northwest onto the Vitus subdivision at Lakeland, where we would then catch another set of Jersey Trops running north here at Vitus Junction. Vitus Junction is where the Vitus subdivision converges with the Wildwood subdivision, which this train will take north all the way to Baldwin. Alternatively to IO-44, any of the Tropicana cars bound for their plant in Cincinnati won't be leaving Tampa until almost the next morning on northbound manifest train M442. As there is no intermodal or set of intermodals that can get the Trops directly to Cincinnati, they utilize the manifest trains taking M442 to Waycross and then train M542 from Waycross to Cincinnati. But as for the namesake New Jersey-bound Trops, here's one last shot of an IO-44 screaming north through Lake Panasoffkee right at sunset. This would be our last shot of the Jersey Trops way down south. Once IO-44 made it to Baldwin, they'd make an eastern turn onto what's known as the SP line to run towards the Jacksonville Intermodal ramp. Once the Jerseys get there, they'll be set on yet another intermodal to run them all the way to New Jersey. And upon our Halloween of 2023 trip to Folkston, Georgia is where I would cover just about all of that. Folkestone, Georgia, the town that's almost always been known as the train watcher's paradise, but is also easily recognizable as the corridor out of Jacksonville. The rather busy Nahunta subdivision between Callahan and Folkestone sees a handful of some of the highest priority intermodal trains on CSX's system. On a good day, there will be hundreds of containers and trailers stacked onto one of these cross-country trains. As seen here, coming south through downtown just after 1 p.m. is train IO25, running south from Chicago to Jacksonville. And amidst those hundreds of shipping companies, you can find just about anybody from Walmart to Amazon Prime. IO25 is the highest priority train that runs through this territory, and the goods on this train have to be wherever they're going very quickly. Though ultimately, whether the goods are coming from somewhere in central Florida or a northern suburb in Ohio, it all runs right down into here at Jacksonville TOFC. Known by folks more conveniently as Jack's Ramp, this is the facility that stages all of the intermodal and piggyback trains that run north or south out of here to various points around the country. Intermodal ramps like Jacksonville more accurately are like transloading facilities. This is where trucks off the highways come in to transload their trailers or containers from road to rail, or vice versa from rail to road for the last mile shipping to the seaport or respective customer. That said, with intermodal trains coming into this facility from everywhere through Florida to Ohio, there's always something happening here at Jack's Ramp. If there isn't a train coming in or going out, there's trucks and forklifts moving all over the place to get trains ready because something will be moving within a few hours. In particular, though, on this Halloween of 2023, we'd be focused on those 9 Tropicana reefers set off in the background that would have just been dropped off the night before by an inbound IO44 from Tampa. Now in Jack's Ramp, the Jersey Trops would see their next movement upon train IO32 from here at Jack's to North Bergen, New Jersey, a hotshot train that'll get them across the country overnight. Though the crew for that train wouldn't go on duty in Moncrief till close to 10:15, so that still gave me plenty of time to look around Jacksonville, and here we can start to give y'all a bit of an idea of the layout around here we're working with. First stop on the map of the morning would be Dinsmore Connection to the northeast. The signals here at Dinsmore Connection are the beginning of the Jacksonville Terminal subdivision that runs from here all the way around to Baldwin, and it's not exactly a straight line, that subdivision, but we'll look at it on a map more closely here in a moment. Dinsmore in and of itself is the northern connection from the Nahunta subdivision to the northern entrance of the Jacksonville Ramp. The Y that is just to the south of the Trout River Boulevard road crossing can take trains off of what is now the Jacksonville Terminal Sub into the Jack's Ramp from the north. And moving around the corner to the crossing of Old Kings Road, here is the stem of the same Y just around the corner heading into the Jack's Ramp. Looking northeast from Old Kings, this is the Dinsmore Y heading into Jack's Ramp, and turning around, we are now looking towards Jack's Ramp, where the Norfolk Southern's GS&F main actually crosses this connection track about a half-mile down. The Jacksonville Ramp was originally built on Atlantic Coast Line land to meet the demand of upcoming intermodal service, but they had to cross the Southern Railway's Jacksonville main to access the property. Later in the video, we'll see this diamond crossing more up close. But now we'll give you a look at the actual Jacksonville map here. With the CSX tracks in blue and the Norfolk Southern in black, it's pretty easy to see how closely these two companies converge in this city. Coming in from the north is the Nahunta subdivision coming from Callahan and Folkestone, passing the first Y here at Dinsmore, which begins the Jacksonville Terminal Sub. Continuing on the CSX, you'll reach the first yard known as Moncrief. This is the freight section of Jacksonville where all of the freight and merchandise traffic is sorted in the city. Just a touch further south, you have the Honeymoon Y, which connects the CSX Sanford subdivision to both the Jacksonville Terminal and the Norfolk Southern's connection to the Florida East Coast Railway further south. Turning west from Honeymoon, you have the continuation of the Jacksonville Terminal Sub, now known as the SP line, continuing all the way to Baldwin. And the Y that's located about a quarter of the way down the SP line is known as Duval Connection. This is the southern entrance to the Jacksonville Ramp, as the yard itself is also known as Duval. Geographically, right between CSX's Moncrief and Duval yards is Norfolk Southern's Simpson Yard. This is the staging area for intermodal and freight traffic headed to or from the Florida East Coast. Heading north from Simpson is the former Georgia Southern and Florida Main that crosses the CSX Callahan subdivision at Crawford. As far as the CSX goes, though, their track layout here is fairly similar to that they have over in Tampa, with the freight and intermodal yards separated, except these two are geographically further apart. Similar also, though, that the intermodal facility does not hold any motive power assigned to trains. All of the motive power for Jacksonville is set over in Moncrief for fueling and servicing. So Moncrief Yard is where our IO32 train we were waiting on would go on duty in a couple of hours. By the time about 10:30 rolled around, train IO32-31 would call Jacksonville Dispatch requesting to leave Moncrief Yard. Reason being that, as I mentioned before, basically all motive power for Jacksonville is staged over in Moncrief Yard, so they must transfer over here to Duval to pick up their train. So for that move, I'd stake it out over at the Pickettville Road crossing just north of the Duval connection to see the light power for O32 come to enter Jack's ramp. And by 10:53, here they came. CSX GEs number 5117 and 3100 would be the power for today's IO32, now heading up the nearly 3-mile-long single track into Duval Yard. Apart from Commonwealth Avenue about a half-mile away, there are 0 road crossings on this long straightaway into the yard, and for good reason. A lot of the intermodals leaving out of here can be over 2 miles long. So this straightaway gives them plenty of room to double or triple their trains out of the ramp, blocking no crossings in the process. As trains headed north out of Duval Yard do not leave via the northern entrance through Dinsmore, they'll come back south out of the ramp back through Duval Connection. From this point, they can turn either east or west. Turning east will take a train through the Honeymoon Y, north on the Jack's Terminal Sub, back through Dinsmore and onto the Nahanta Sub, but in most cases, which includes this IO32, they'll turn west at the connection, running the SP line down to Baldwin, then turning north onto the Callahan subdivision and running north from there. In another couple hours, the IO32 had their whole train put together, that which included the 9 Tropicana reefers set to go on their journey to Jersey. So at 12:45, south came IO32-31 back through Duval Connection. Around 3 miles to our west is Jacksonville's Publix Distribution Center off Wheeler Avenue, and this was the agreed upon meeting location for IO32's conductor and engineer. It's a long walk from one end of Jacksonville ramp to the other, so crews often agree upon certain meeting points for the engineer to bring the train and the conductor to then be driven to. And for trains leaving out of Jack's ramp headed down the SP, this Publix is a common meeting location. Back at this time, the Howard Street Tunnel in downtown Baltimore, Maryland that this train passes through was still too short to accommodate double-stacked containers. So 32 and its counterpart 31 would both be running with only single-stacked containers for the time being, though I have seen recently that CSX is making big changes there, so they should be carrying double stacks pretty soon. The trains stop at the Publix Center to pick up the conductor would give me plenty of time to leapfrog them over to Baldwin on the northern connection, where the train will turn north onto the Callahan Sub. Baldwin is a pretty big juncture of railroads here. There's about 4 subdivisions that did, or at least used to, come together right here. The Wildwood subdivision running towards Tampa is down to our south, the Callahan subdivision to the north, the SP line or Jacksonville Terminal to the east, and the former Tallahassee subdivision running towards New Orleans on the west, now owned and operated by the Florida Gulf and Atlantic Railroad, as CSX sold this line off many years ago. But now taking the connection north by west onto the Callahan Sub is train IO32, carrying a plentiful bunch of fresh orange juice out of Bradenton bound for Kearney, New Jersey.
We got a first medium in yellow water, medium clear, eastbound, 51-17,000.
The nearly 3-mile long straightaway out of Jack's Ramp would be plenty to accommodate today's 32 doubling out, as their train would only total about 3,200 feet today. Most of it would actually turn out to be empty. And there's a couple of assertions that could be made right off the bat as to why one of these top priority trains will run with so much empty train. The first being that the well cars or spine cars could be needed in one of the adjacent terminals that this train is headed to, so they're simply using the train as a transportation method for those sets of cars. Or the second being that the road-to-rail shipper simply missed the cut. These trains, especially those that carry UPS and Amazon, have very specific cutoff times for when loads can arrive at the terminal. If a load or set thereof is not within the terminal before the cutoff time, it's not making it onto the train. So simply put, with these top priority trains, when their times come, they go, loaded or not.
32, 31 got a limited clearance. Right field. Track 1 crossing over the 3. 5117 north.
Now on the Callahan subdivision, IO32 has pretty much nothing but straight track for 20 miles until Callahan Junction. In about 15 miles, they'll cross the Norfolk Southern's GS&F main coming out of Jacksonville at Crawford. The straight track and high speed meant that I was unable to catch IO32 there today, but in a couple days I was able to catch another iteration of IO32 crossing the NS at Crawford with a few more Jersey Trops in tow. Now back to our present chase. The next setup spot would be the River Road crossing at Callahan Junction, with the Nahunta subdivision in the foreground heading towards Dinsmore and Moncrief, and the Callahan subdivision in the background diverging to Baldwin. This is where the two CSX mains from Baldwin and Jacksonville converge together towards Folkestone and Waycross, and is where IO32 would catch back up pretty shortly. Now converging onto the Nahunta sub, the IO32 is back on Atlantic Coast Line rails, which they'll take pretty much all the way up the East Coast. In another 20 miles, they would exit the Sunshine State, and in 22 miles, they'd be highballing through downtown Folkestone, Georgia.
CSX IO32 got a first line of the downtown Folkestone, track 1, 5117 north.
Of all trains on the list to chase in this territory, IO32 isn't exactly the brightest idea, considering that it's a very high priority train and a lot of its route is completely straight. Case in point here as they continue straight on the Nahunta sub past the Folkestone turnout with pretty much all straight track until Jessup. In almost any other case, this would have been the last time we would have seen this train, but a miracle from Charlotte came to hold things up. Just north of downtown Folkestone by a few miles is the signaled control point of Birch. This is where the double track through town converges back to single track. And as it would turn out, coming down the A-line was another intermodal opposing the IO32, so they'd have to hold the IO32 up at the switch so that this southbound could pass by. So we found a dirt road private crossing to wait out both trains just a bit north of Birch with a rather interesting red-lettered crossbuck. from Charlotte, North Carolina, headed to Moncrief Yard in Jacksonville for transfer to the Florida East Coast was train IO37. Now, I'm not sure what the antics of this whole deal is in the present day, but around this time there was a deal between CSX and Norfolk Southern that swapped varying duties to the Florida East Coast Railway. So, in short, one of the container trains that Norfolk Southern used to run to the FEC in Jacksonville was now carried by CSX, and vice versa, one of CSX's went to Norfolk Southern. Reason I say this is because I believe the IO37 was the transferred job at this time. Whatever the IO37 consist looked like before this with the Crowley containers and whatnot went to the Norfolk Southern while their train came to CSX. Such explains why you're not really seeing any Crowley brand containers on a train that used to be known for carrying almost nothing but them for many years. Again, not sure if any of this is still valid or if it's even still happening, but at this time that was the case in point. Once the IO37 got by the switch at Birch, there was no time to waste for IO32. That orange juice is not getting any colder under this October sun. Now the challenge really began. 32 no longer had any southward opposition, and it was still straight track until Jessup, Georgia. The only saving grace out here is that the parallel US 301 is two-laned and pretty much in the middle of nowhere with next to no traffic on it most of the time. So while perhaps being fair competition, trains out here will still give you a run for your money, and by that I mean gas money. Somehow managing to leapfrog the train again into downtown Nahunta where the Brunswick subdivision crosses, setting up for a mild telephoto not 20 seconds too soon. Once again, back north on US 301 for another 25 miles until we hit downtown Jessup, and another saving grace to end the chase. As we came into town, northbound M690 was coming through town, having just left Waycross with a manifest train. And while having missed the head end of this one coming through town, it may have been the only reason we saw the IO32 again, as the Intermodal at this point would have been running right on the markers of the M690 just out of Waycross, so we only had a couple minutes even with the train passing to be ready for 32. And in just a few, here came the jerseys for one final time. In tow on IO32, the Jersey-bound Tropicanas would make it to the namesake Kearney, New Jersey distribution center by tomorrow night, from which point it'll take anywhere from 2 to 5 days to have the cars unloaded and sent right back the way they came. When emptied, the Jersey Trops' return to the Sunshine State will look pretty similar to that of their way out, and in just a couple of days we'd be able to see a load return home. Southbound through Folkston, Georgia, Nahunta Sub number 1 would be southbound train IO31 with a fresh batch of Tropicana empties returning from the Kearney, New Jersey facility for Bradenton, Florida. I stumbled out of our cabin for this one and shot this on my phone, but this was the final day we had up here, so we were going home today. So after I saw this, I packed everything up real quick and hit the road. Now seeing the batch of Trops this guy had in stock, we were going to follow this guy back to Jack's ramp. But the route there would be just slightly different. I-031 would end up slowing down past Folkestone a bit though, as Amtrak 91 was in front of them and they'd have to make a station stop in Jacksonville, which would hold the train up just slightly. This allowed me to leapfrog the train in a good 20 miles back to Callahan Junction. Except now on a southbound run, the Intermodal would stay on the Nahunta sub running towards Jacksonville directly.
31, I got 145
Now back into the Sunshine State, the Tropicanas, rather than heading back towards Baldwin, will stay on the Nahunta subdivision running straight towards Jack's Ramp via the northern entrance at Dinsmore. This is routine for all southbound intermodals coming into Jack's Ramp. The southbounds will come into the ramp via Dinsmore and the northern entrance, while northbounds leaving will exit via Duval Connection and Baldwin. I-031 is quite literally the counterpart to I-032, so it's got the same Tropicana stock and UPS trailers. Dispatch ain't stopping this train for nothing.
31, I'm over at 345 here. Okay. 3101, medium approach in for southbound, 45.
Now at the very end of the Nahunta sub, the I-031 passes the signals at Dinsmore Connection, where they'll diverge off the main into Jack's Ramp. Taking the north leg of the Y at Dinsmore will take I-031 down the mile-long connector to the property of Duval Yard. In the process, they'll cross over the Norfolk Southern's GSNF main coming into Simpson Yard. As the I-031 began to slow to a crawl across Trout River Road, I found an alternate route around to make it to the Norfolk Southern main. Because provided Trout River wasn't blocked by the container train, you could basically take this road straight west and then south to the Norfolk Southern's GSNF. It turns into Garden Street a couple blocks west, but it's ultimately the same stretch of pavement that'll get you there. And from the Garden Street crossing to which I'd move, you can see down the tracks a ways to where CSX is crossing the NS. There's really no way to get close to this diamond interlocking on foot, so I took the drone in the air to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like around there. We're geographically just over half a mile from Dinsmore Connection, and you can see as they cross the Norfolk Southern how CSX sachets literally right into Duval Yard after the diamond. It's quite the interesting setup that I never even knew was here until this day, and something tells me that CSX will take priority over this diamond considering how much action Duval Yard sees. But maybe some of you Jacksonville fanatics can tell me if this diamond A has a specific name that I haven't found yet, or B, who takes priority over it. Either way, I-031 would be down to under 10 miles an hour for the rest of their trek into Jack's Ramp. And ultimately, once they break this train apart, the stuff on this train can go pretty much anywhere. Some of these containers could go to Central Florida, some will get unloaded here and be sent off elsewhere on trucks. But we know that the Tropicana section of this train will eventually be set off here and put on another intermodal bound for Tampa. But one more goodie from the bag here in Jacksonville though, as this was about the time of the morning that Norfolk Southern sees a couple of intermodals arrive to their Simpson Yard. Which in pretty much any other case wouldn't matter, but the signal at the interlocking for NS that I could see turned to a yellow approach while I was still here. Only about 10 minutes after the I-031 had finished crossing, the NS came up to an approach, and while this indication may have a slightly different meaning on Norfolk Southern, it still means the train's gonna have to stop pretty shortly. I believe that this is the second to last southward signal before NS's Simpson Yard, and with that being the destination of this oncoming train, they're gonna have to stop pretty soon, so this is the best they can get. Once they get to the yard, they'll only be able to proceed within at 15 miles per hour. I don't remember exactly what train this was, and I think Norfolk Southern has made some symbol changes since this, but going off the updated symbols, I think that this was train 26J. That would be intermodal and UPS traffic from Inman Yard at Atlanta, Georgia to Simpson Yard, Jacksonville. The JB Hunt and EMP containers paired with the timing of this train is what leads me to believe that, but again, that could be totally wrong. The Union Pacific SD70 in second place was also a nice treat. Union Pacific sometimes makes it onto that train as well, another reason for my assumption. For the rest of this November 2nd, I'd hang around Baldwin and Jacksonville, catching whatever miscellaneous movements I could find, but I wouldn't catch anything else this day that pertained to our Jersey Trops returning home. So this is where we'll leave off out of Jacksonville, but the now Bradenton-bound Trops still have a good whole state to get through. And we'd see another set of them next on their empty run to Tampa. Back in a town now with a rather welcome name, the empty Jersey Trops for Bradenton are now tacked on the head of southbound train I-045 for Tampa. It's now a rather cold December night in downtown Plant City, Florida, and as Christmas lights illuminate the entire downtown region, most of the populace has gone to sleep. At 1:45 on a Tuesday, just a few days before Christmas, there's not much else to be seen or heard in the downtown region now. Though perhaps in tandem with the red and green Christmas lights, the red railroad lights would soon illuminate as train I-045 came to cross the diamond southbound. After their one-day layover in Jack's Ramp, the empty Trops for Bradenton would take the head of I-045 off the ramp, arriving in Tampa just after midnight. This, pretty much since the precision scheduled railroading philosophy took over on April 1st of 2017, has been routine for all of the Jersey Trops headed to or from Jersey, running on the heads of respective intermodals from Tampa to Jersey and back. Aside from the Tropicana empties every other night, I-045 also hauls all of the container and UPS traffic bound for Uceda Yard in Tampa. And because they carry UPS, this is yet another train on the Jack's dispatch list that they're going to keep moving. Amidst the returning Trops for Bradenton will be the Trops also returning from Cincinnati. As I mentioned before, the Cincy Trops utilize the manifest freights and not intermodals, so such is in the case as this southbound M441 caught near Bryceville, Florida, the empty Trops from Cincy will be hitching a ride back to Tampa from Waycross in incremental blocks on that train. Both the Cincy and Jersey Trops will be combined again in Yeoman Yard at Tampa once both trains arrive, and train L700 will be the final leap to Bradenton once everything is conjoined in Yeoman. Now the final combination point. CSX's Yeoman Freight Yard is where train L700 and its crew would go on duty at 0400 to put together the Cincy and Jersey Trops headed home for Bradenton. Nowadays, especially with the position Tropicana sits in, it's rare to see very many cars returning home on any given day, but I've been lucky enough over fairly recent years to see a handful of decent-sized trains returning home. The train and its cargo are usually on the move southward out of the yard about 6:30. And this is now a combination of all empty reefers headed home for the Tropicana plant as well as any miscellaneous freight headed for the same plant or adjacent industries, as seen running south through the fog on this morning in late November 2022. I'd be remiss if I didn't remember to include this picturesque scene that has pretty much painted the picture of all Tropicana Juice Trains ever since they started running in the 1970s. The former Atlantic Coast Line's Big Manatee Drawspan is one of the largest and most iconic bridges in the state. And it's almost impossible nowadays to see a Tropicana train in or outbound from Bradenton that stretches the entire span of the river as we see here. As we can say about most things in the present day, they just don't make them like they used to. And unfortunately, by the way the citrus economy sounds right now, pretty soon they may not make them at all. I don't want to think that way, and of course there's obviously no way to know. But as we stand here with the Jersey and now Cincinnati Trops having arrived back empty at the location at which we started, I can't help but wonder but for how much longer we may see these white iconic reefers rolling the rails of CSX. Though having started much later than its heyday, this is most certainly a train that I grew up with, and I'm thankful that I was around long enough to have seen this train running when it was still a unit train to New Jersey or at least to Jacksonville. So from the days when the unit Tropicana Juice Train could roll through Plant City with a pair of AC 6000 locomotives to when it first began running on the intermodal trains to now when it's hardly a mere shell of what we saw even then. I'm very grateful to have captured the incredible diversity of videos I have of this train over the many years that I've been watching trains in my lifetime. And again, while I was never around to see this train when it was a full fleet of nothing but orange cars just like the fruit inside, the namesake Tropicana Juice Train has been all but an icon for myself and thousands of other rail fans nationwide. So I thank you for taking the time to take a look back with me on the Tropicana Juice Train and how they now utilize the Intermodals from Tampa to Jersey and back. The journey to Jersey is still an almost daily occurrence, but who's to say for how much longer? On the former Seaboard Sarasota sub at Tropicana Bradenton, this is Kotabeaner, and I'll see you next time somewhere on the Sunshine State Rails.